Hey guys, Mike here, and today I'm bringing you another segment on Dragon Ball Z. The topic of this video is one that I believe many people have been wondering about for a long time. And that is, what if the Z Fighters destroyed Babidi's spaceship before Buu was revived? The story here is basically that once the Z Fighters were inside of Babidi's spaceship during the Buu saga, and fighting the different opponents on the different stages, Vegeta proposed blowing up the entire spaceship just to get to the bottom, as opposed to fighting all of the different opponents on each stage. Naturally, this was shut down by the Supreme Kai, who said blowing up the spaceship would risk awakening Majin Buu. But what if Vegeta and the other Z Fighters decided to ignore Supreme Kai's warnings and did it anyway? How would blowing up Babidi's spaceship and awakening Buu prematurely affect the story? And would this new course of action result in positive or negative consequences for the Z Fighters and the rest of the Earth? Well, let's take a more detailed look at this and find out. First, there's a number of different factors that have to be considered to find out what exactly would happen next after the Z Fighters destroy Babidi's spaceship. First, we have to consider the words of the Supreme Kai, and to be honest, most of what he has to say is very unreliable. The primary reason that the Z Fighters didn't simply destroy Babidi's spaceship is because of what the Supreme Kai said, namely that it could lead to the premature release of Majin Buu, which in turn could lead to all of their deaths and the destruction of the Earth. However, the Supreme Kai's objections can be called into question because of the fact that 1. He doesn't know how powerful the Z Fighters actually are. 2. He has no idea how much energy Babidi has actually gathered for Majin Buu. And 3. He's constantly overestimating the powers of Babidi's men and underestimating the powers of the Z Fighters in comparison to them. From the moment the Supreme Kai meets the Z Fighters, he's constantly underestimating their powers and assuming that he's more powerful than they are. This carries over into when the Z Fighters fight Babidi's henchmen, as the Supreme Kai assumes that they'll lose unless they team up together to fight them. And in nearly every example where the Supreme Kai is concerned, he's immediately proven wrong by the Z Fighters. If anything, every action made by the Supreme Kai actually hurts their efforts to stop Majin Buu, so it's safe to assume we could simply discard all of his concerns about this course of action. The next factor would definitely have to be Vegeta. As we know, Vegeta got an idea of how powerful Babidi's magic was after he saw Spopovich and Yamu at the tournament. After observing the fight between Goku and Yakan, Vegeta saw Goku's power firsthand. It was at this point that Vegeta decided to fall under Babidi's spell so that he could use the increase in power to close the gap between himself and Goku. However, if they were to destroy Babidi's spaceship, this fight would likely never take place. As a result, it'd be very unlikely that Vegeta would see Goku's power firsthand until he's fighting Majin Buu himself. Thus, there would be no real time for Vegeta to fall under Babidi's spell and for him to turn against the rest of the Z Fighters. This would give us a more focused, albeit slightly weaker Vegeta who would be helping the rest of the Z Fighters fight against Majin Buu. And now, of course, this brings us to the final and biggest factor of them all, Majin Buu himself, or namely his power at this point after they blew up the spaceship. And I believe that the series actually gives us a definite answer here. If we recall, all of the energy that was stolen from Gohan at the tournament was deposited directly into Majin Buu's shell, and went directly to him. Babidi was then shocked to find that Buu's power meter was reading at nearly halfway full. He then remarked that it's very possible that it came from a single shot, which we know was Gohan's power. This should immediately tell us that there's only one source that all of this power came from, and that would be Gohan himself, which would mean that Buu and Gohan would be equal in power. And this instantly makes this a much better scenario than it was in the original timeline. The reason for this is because both Goku and Vegeta are more powerful than Gohan is, and even more powerful than he was when he fought against Cell. This would mean that either one of them in their Super Saiyan 2 forms would be more than a match for Buu and would be able to destroy him. And with Gohan still there, who would be equal in power to Buu at this point, the three of them could easily team up and destroy him without Goku ever needing to go Super Saiyan 3. The only difference in this situation is that it's likely that Babidi and his henchmen are all still alive after the explosion of the ship. So the Z Fighters would have to fight all of them at once, as opposed to one of them at a time, and this would include Dabura, who at this point would likely be more powerful than Buu is. But considering the combined strength of the three Super Saiyans and the Supreme Kai, this shouldn't be too big of a problem, as Gohan and the Supreme Kai can deal with the henchmen while Goku and Vegeta deal with the rest. And if for any reason it becomes too much, Goku can easily turn into a Super Saiyan 3 and destroy them all with ease. So there you have it. I believe I've demonstrated exactly what would happen if the Z Fighters decide to ignore Supreme Kai's words and destroy Babidi's spaceship anyway, releasing Majin Buu prematurely. In the end, I believe that he would end up being a far weaker adversary than he ended up being in the original timeline, and the saga wouldn't last anywhere near as long as it did. As a result, the Z-Fighters would never end up being killed, the Earth would never end up being destroyed, Goku would never need to come back to life, and Buu would be killed in quick fashion. In the end, it's only due to the Supreme Kai's incompetence that any of this ever happened in the first place, and if he had simply stepped aside and allowed the Z-Fighters to do what they wanted to, everything would have worked out alright in the end. Well, my name is Mike, and this has been another segment on Dragon Ball Z. Let me know your own thoughts in the comments section and what topics you'd like me to talk about in the future. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And as I always say, stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future. And you better subscribe!